The
Hey,
stream is
kids. Stream is live. How you
Hi,
doing?
Steph. Yes,
Good to see you, mate.
good to see you too.
All right. I don't think if anyone's there, but let's just roll it. Actually, let's just check on YouTube because this is new to me. Just actually quickly see if what's happening on the channel. Then I'll know. Might get some echo there. Just viewable channel. We do this. I mean, so now it's KJ's Picks Live. That's fine. So it's got a different thing, but we'll work that out. That's fine. All right. So we can just put that off. We should be live. Yep. Good. We're live. Let's see if anybody finds us. I said it's an impromptu thing.
Yes, it's last
Hey,
minute. So,
how was the week?
well, I've been just editing and working on my film stuff and getting back into the groove for the new year. So, all good. I can't complain.
Vincent's just joined us. He's in Cape Town.
Hi, Vincent.
Yeah, just yeah. So you've been editing.
Yeah, more or less, and doing other stuff. There's a lot
Yeah.
going on. I have a lot going on this year for a change. After a few years of not doing very much, now things are back in full swing. There's a lot happening with all of my film projects, as you know, and there's uh, there's also stuff happening in Prague, which is a great town to be in. So, and yeah, it's been a busy week, and I'm sure it will be a busy weekend as well. But I can't complain. How about yourself?
Yeah, yeah, just the same time, just the week, just getting through the basics, obviously communicating with you about our project, those comms. Yeah, just working around some record grading and moving some records, just a collection that I've been moving. What else? And then helping a friend of mine sort of move some audio gear as well. He's immigrating and it's some top end, actually mostly, what do you say? It's mostly Dolby Atmos and Auro 3D oriented gear, but he'd not been well. So yeah, it's basically an immigration sale. So he's moving stateside with his daughter. And what else? Yeah, just I mean, as you know, it's the weather's just been up and down. Just sorting out the records and stuff. With this move and everything. I mean, you can see. So I also pulled out some stuff today. That I wanted to maybe go through. And I'd said to you, this as it is. I think weekly we can always start this like KJ's picks. So you've always said the last couple of records you've been listening to. So maybe let's start with that.
Okay, well, I was out doing stuff most of the day, so I wasn't listening to much music at home today, but I have stuff from the past few days. When did we last do this? A week ago?
Yeah, roughly. I think just over a week ago. I think.
So I put some stuff aside. It's actually a lot of South African jazz, and I guess yesterday and the evening before yesterday, I was listening to a lot of jazz at home. But I'll show you this first. The main thing that was going on for me musically in the week was actually this, which was a performance of Gustav Mahler's Third Symphony by the Czech Philharmonic, which
Wow.
there I had it in Czech. This should be the English version. Can you read that?
Yep. Subscription concert. Yeah. I just need to, because I'm see, I can't see the comments, but let me see if I go large. What happens? No, we can't hide the chat. Show chat.
Anyway,
Let's see.
that's always a real highlight is to see Mahler performed live by a symphony orchestra, especially by the Czech Philharmonic, and so that was extraordinary. And I know that uh, Leonard Bernstein at one point was asked about why he didn't record some certain Mahler symphony with the Berlin Philharmonic, and he replied that the best orchestras to perform Mahler with were essentially the Czech Philharmonic, the Vienna Philharmonic, and the New York Philharmonic, because they were Mahler's own orchestras. That they were all orchestras that Mahler himself had conducted and had been essential in the formation of, and also had done premieres of many of his works with. So the what I saw, the Third Symphony was not performed in Prague originally as its premiere, but it's one of the large scale sort of big Mahler symphonies, also with vocalists and vocal elements. So it was extremely impressive, and it's hard to top that in any week. And I have several records of the Third Symphony of Mahler, different recordings. I'm pretty sure I have a Czech and an Austrian recording of that. But I dug one record out. I actually wasn't listening to this in the week, but it's maybe the most interesting Mahler
Before
record.
you, all right, no, go. Yeah,
go ahead, please.
No. No, just go, and then I'll. I mean, I didn't want to move to jazz, before you finish classical.
It's just this one, the highlight of my week, and then we can move on to jazz.
Sure.
Very quick. But this particular record, which is actually the First Symphony of Gustav Mahler.
Let me just go full screen for that so I can actually see it. Just hang on a second. Just gonna go full screen. Pull it up. That Symphony Gustav, go up a bit. C1. What pressing is that?
That's this is a very important and essential recording of the First Symphony of Gustav Mahler. Not the one that I just saw, but this is probably one of the most famous recordings of the Czech Philharmonic. This particular recording, this is the premiere recording, which is a club recording on the Grammofonový klub of Supraphon from 1964. But this record was reissued, as I know from my friend Ivan Bierhansel from Agon Orchestra, who was also the bassist for the Plastic People of the Universe and DG 307, two of the legendary Czech underground bands of the 1970s. He has told me that this particular recording was reissued dozens of times. It's been reissued in Japan, in the United States, in Canada, in Spain, in France, in Portugal, in Germany, everywhere. And this is considered like really one of the top recordings of that particular symphony. This is a premiere recording from 1964 by the Czech Philharmonic with Karl Ančerl, who was probably the most famous Czech conductor of the 20th century, was actually from the same town, had the same birthplace as Gustav Mahler, Jihlava, in the Czech Republic. And Ančerl ended up in Canada, but he was born here and had a very difficult life politically because of his Jewish background. He was a concentration camp survivor and also an avant-gardist and a modernist composer himself. So he had lots of political problems under the communist regime, ended up emigrating after 1968. But during the 1960s, when the situation was a little bit more liberal and more open, he was also the principal conductor of the Czech Philharmonic and brought back a lot of Mahler's music to the contemporary scene then, as Bernstein was doing in New York. So that's a particularly interesting recording. If you go to Discogs, you'll see it's been reissued a couple of dozen times, but that's the original one. So I just put that aside. I actually wasn't listening to that, but listening to Mahler generally.
No, it's great because as I've been putting out records, so I wanted to add to that, but I wanted you to finish before we hit the jazz stuff. So obviously, I've been sorting out lots of records, but I think the first thing, let me start with Bernstein, is that, through the years, I became kind of mates and we communicated and what have you with Gary Lucas, who discovered Jeff Buckley, Gods and Monsters, but also played with Captain Beefheart. But Gary always says, that he played with the three Bs, Bernstein, Buckley, and Beefheart. And I was very, very privileged back in the day, in New York City to actually see the Gods and Monsters. Gary's amazing. He's on my social media sort of feed, and we chatted. We actually did a Skype once. It's been a year or two, but we chat from time to time. But he's just one of those like amazing New York guitarists, that came out of that. He trained, classically and all of that. He's got this frizzy hair and all of that. Interesting cat. So that was the one thing, because I pulled out some Bernstein LPs this week. Got through Discogs, not valuable, but some great ones. Some on DG, some not. All of that, and then interestingly enough, because I've been also obviously looking at what records am I keeping up. I literally inherited close to 10,000 classical records. But I pulled out this one. It's a super fun.
Right.
Yeah, kind of that of value, but I was like, I'm going to keep this, because it just looks interesting. It's the Czech Philharmonic with Martin Turkovsky. I haven't listened to it. It's got to be cleaned. Recorded at the Superfon Studios in Prague. I think this is the first press. Is it the mono? Is it the ST? Because they had two. We can pull it out and have a look. It's got to be cleaned. This is the SUA. So this is the mono. Must be. Yep, not the ST. SUA. Yeah. Here we go.
Sure.
So it'll get it clean. I've got a mono stylus. It's probably going to sound great. Just something historic. I've got so many records from the former Soviet territories or whatever, from behind the Iron Curtain, and that's the whole thing that's been going. So I just wanted to show that. And now let's just roll into your picks.
Well, yeah. So mainly the other last few days, I was listening to a lot of jazz records. I go through certain moods where I'll go in deep in one day and listen to a lot of old reggae records or vintage hip hop records or something. I just get into a certain vein with what I feel like listening to. And in yesterday and the evening before that, I was listening to quite a few jazz records, mostly South African jazz records, which forms a big part of my collection and what I listen to generally. So I'll start with a real classic of South African jazz, but this is a relatively new record, new pressing. I don't know if you've even seen this.
Yeah, so we are, that's the one that's done by Mr. what's it called, Mr. Bongo.
Yeah, but it's this was done in partnership. This is a limited edition that was done in partnership with HHV in Berlin for their jazz summer, which was last summer. And I'll show you the record. I actually just got this. This is actually sort of what sent me down that particular channel with listening to South African jazz in the last few days. Have you seen this? This is a limited edition that was done in Germany last year.
Yeah, I know about that one because Eric at We Are Busybodies also did one, and I got there was the motto. Just let me take a look at the cover. Yeah, that's the Mr. Bongo, and that's got the original. Yeah, because the cover was good cover. Yeah, because there were two recent reissues of that are like brilliant. I mean, the We Are Busybodies one is fantastic. Although I don't think that the cover is the cover art. The production of the cover is as good as that. And then there's that. And they're both commanding sort of prime price on Discogs. Aside from having the original.
No, sure, and it's great to have it finally available with the original track listing and the remastered version. It's a great record, and it's something that I've been listening to for years anyway. So I'm happy to finally have a really, really good vinyl copy of it, which actually just arrived in the mail from Berlin basically the other day. Along with this, another new record, but sort of.
Oh wow! Oh no! Don't kill me, you bastard! That's why this show's not for kids when I use those words.
And this is part of a new series. It's also a really new record. Just a few
Label?
months. Melodies Record Club, which is essentially a small press reissue label where well-known DJs get to repress their favorite jazz records and stuff that they play for the dance floor. So this one, which is the first in the series, is by the UK DJ Fortet, DJ and electronic music producer.
I've got some Fortet CDs. Wow.
And so
Yowza.
this one, who is Kieran Hebden, is his real name, and he has picked for his issue, which is the first in this series, which is the Jackie McLean and Michael Carvin song, the Akamalia extended version, 13-minute version, which is on the A side.
You just show us the back of the track listing and stuff. I'd like to take a look so that when people watch this later, I'm going to just go live so I can see. Okay, Kieran Hebden, Matt Colton. Okay, it's got a barcode, and it's an interesting thing. I'm going to ask you probably a bit of a geeky question. I mean, it's not that you and I are both into it, but
here's your track list.
Yeah, do you know if that came from analog tape or if it was mastered digitally? I'm just out of interest.
I don't know, because I know that it was done with the cooperation of whoever holds the original masters, because both of the songs are actually unreleased versions. They're the extended original versions.
Does it say anything on the cover?
On the cover. What am I looking for?
Who mastered it and the source? Sometimes it does that.
Well, there's a lot of executive producers. Remastered and cut at half speed by Matt Colton, Metropolis Studios.
Doesn't say from the analog tapes or not, eh?
No, but I know that the Jackie McLean song in particular has never been issued in this full 13-minute version. That's the original album version was like an edited thing, which was 8 minutes long, which is what Fortet actually used to DJ. He mentions it in the liner notes. And the Chris McGregor song Ra, which is a Dudu Pukwana composition, is also a longer version than was previously available. And weirdly on this record, the A side is cut at 33 1/3 RPM, and the B side, which is the Chris McGregor song, is cut at 45. So the bass frequencies on the 45 on the B side are amazing. And obviously Mara is a really well-known song, both by Dudu Pukwana and the version by Chris McGregor and the Brotherhood of Breath, but I've never heard it sound so potent and so bass heavy and so dance floor friendly. It's an amazing.
Well, that's the thing about us people that also appreciate DJs. Is that whole thing with 45, and some people are, I mean, obviously it's like tape, the faster it goes. But I mean, it was interesting because when We Are Busybodies reissued the first Drive LP, I was talking to Matt Temple of Matsuli, correct? Yep.
Yeah, sure.
And I said to Matt, that was when I was doing a little bit of work around that issue here in South Africa, and I said to Matt that it sounds bloody fantastic, and because he was like whatever, because the early days of before when Eric was starting to reissue stuff, and I said it's done on 45, and the original was only 33 because there was enough space, on the vinyl, so. I think it was digitally cut by what's his name, Noah, Canadian, Noah Mintz, Canadian. He's a great guy. He uses a lot of the Manly gear and all of that. But I said to Matt, take a listen to it. I said it's at 45, and it does sound fantastic. And I've got this thing that if I can you know, I don't like. So I'll give you an example. Just going through this. So this is a box set of this is Classic Records. This is a box set, 4 records, single side, 45 RPM of a Sarah Vaughan, right? It's not that I don't like these boxes. Only one side each. So you've got 4 records splitting up this album.
Right.
Okay. I don't like sometimes splitting up an album that I've got to chop and change and chop and change. I mean, it does sound great, but sometimes I just want it to flow, if you know what I mean. But on the other hand, if you can get an entire thing onto 45, go for it.
I like buying stuff that's been remastered to sound really good on 45, but there's a trend now also in reissuing vintage hip hop records, like by a Tribe Called Quest or Black Moon or Main Source. A lot of early 90s bass heavy New York boom bap records. Those get reissued in these specialized editions as a box of 7 inches. And that's cool. I'm sure that that's a great thing to own, and it must sound amazing. But I would rather just have the records, which is how I'm used to listening to those things. I'm not such an audiophile or such a snob about 45 RPM listening that I need to own that. Those are really specialized things. However, sometimes like some issues, the remastering for 45 can sound amazing, and it's much better than anything you've heard before. Like what Soul Jazz does with reissuing Studio One stuff. I'll actually show you one. I'll be right back.
Sure. I don't know if anybody's I haven't seen this. I'm just being straightforward. If anybody's, because we went into a different link. I'm just actually going to just check. You know, just
I hope people are actually
on my YouTube.
I am here.
Go for it.
This is an example. This isn't actually something I was listening to in the last days, but this is a Cedric I.M. Brooks reissue by Soul Jazz, done deliberately for 45, made for DJs. This whole series of things, which are mostly either vintage ska records or 80s dancehall records, that Soul Jazz has remastered for these like super bass heavy 12-inch 45 reissues. These are amazing. All of these, I have a bunch of them. This was just the
That's
one.
a 12-inch. When was that put out? I just want to check something. I'm just checking something on this.
All those things are in the last 2 or 3 years. I'm looking. I think that's 2022 probably, but I don't know. But that one is Cedric I.M. Brooks. It's like who then later went on to form the Mystic Revelation of Rastafari. So this is like, you know, basically instrumental rock steady, early reggae, instrumental studio tracks, but lots of percussion, free jazz saxophone, amazing stuff. That sounds great on 45. Some of these things are really great. I only mentioned it with the Chris McGregor thing because that's an odd thing with that record, that it's a split press. It like one side is a 33 and the other side is a 45 because they sound better that way. So it was put out that way deliberately.
Audiophiles. That's why I asked the question. Audiophiles often talk about the 45 thing, but then, you know, a lot of people, and especially in the so-called, well, not the so-called, in the vinyl community, people don't really address as much the DJ side of things. You know, there are a couple of people, you know, and you know, there's Michael 45 on his stream. They had a whole hip hop thing the other day. And Stunt Rock Confusion, you know, great sort of vinyl community person. You know, he's got probably the most eclectic collection, one of the largest. And then there's this guy Thomas in Denmark. And they don't, you know, they don't do this whole audiophile thing. They more come out of a bit of a DJ background, you know. And I'm sitting here with a system that's a bit audiophile-y, but I've also got the rotary mixer and stuff. And I'm starting to really appreciate, because DJs were just so essential in the transgression of music, you know, from hip hop, electronic, you know, all of that. From, you know, and that for me is very interesting, is that this is coming from a DJ label and not an audiophile label?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. DJs and DJ culture and sound system culture kept vinyl pressing alive for about 2 decades when it was in the doldrums. Um, I definitely come out of that background. I'm a working DJ myself. I DJ fairly often here in Prague, and I like I'm not like a serious professional DJ, but I love playing music out in public to people and exposing them to music that they wouldn't normally get to hear otherwise, especially African music. And so that type of reissue project is just different. It's geared at a different audience, and it's at the tastes of the DJ who will then project it onto an even wider audience, but who are going to dance to this music or appreciate it in a different way than necessarily the audiophile situation. It's just different. But I think both are important. Both are very much part of the vinyl culture. So I also pay attention to the information about who masters a record and who presses it. But mostly I trust labels and reissue specialists, and I know who are the people who really keep the DJ market in mind, which are people like Soul Jazz, Matsui Music, who you mentioned earlier, and numerous others, and also that Quartet record that I just showed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite amazing, that we've come into this this little show sort of slowly, just sort of kind of hanging out. It's quite amazing, and just getting back to that, I just wanted to show you something that I just wanted a little interlude. As I was going through the hip hop show and other stuff the other day, I pulled out this book. I mean,
Yes.
Just such a.
I have to say, and then with there were a lot of these hip hop books used for their title quotations from Rakim, which that as well. To me, MC means move the crowd, and
and this is so cool.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, I pulled out three books to just just these photos. Somebody also on the show last night was saying, "Who's your favorite female rapper?" And I went Latifah, and then but they were just because it's just even in this whole vinyl community, women and black people are marginalized, and there is a mate of mine from Lesotho who's got an amazing taste. He was possibly going to join this evening, but he said it's better week. We've done some work together on some film work. Got an amazing taste in music. He's like one of those guys who listens to anything from South African jazz to Godspeed You Emperor. And that for me is where it's at. But it's just so important that we need to get more people represented in this whole thing, because there's been a lot of talk lately, and I'm just going to address it on the show. That this whole vinyl thing is quite like white guys talking together. And I'll do my best to change it. That's me. You know me.
Well, I mean, I always in my films try to strive for diversity of representation and giving platforms to as diverse and as open-minded a group of people as possible. I think it's really important, and I think that older white guys like us have had the reins for too long, and
the privilege.
Yeah, because we have a certain privilege within society anyway. Also, economic privilege, which factors into that allows people like us to too much control the flow of information and what gets talked about. And I'm all for giving a platform to as many different points of view as possible. I absolutely don't feel threatened by that. Quite the opposite. I feel more threatened by the continuation of the status quo of the same people participating and propagating what's the official culture. Not just within vinyl culture. I think in popular culture generally, that's a massive problem that should be addressed. And I love to see more diversity. And I'm happy to see that, for example, someone like Wax Poetics magazine really goes out of their way to showcase in the mixtapes and stuff that they promote recently online, that they really give a place for female DJs, and they really strive for gender equity, and that's a great thing. I'm all for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important, and I think through a couple of shows and jumping in, into other people's shows as we can, and and that's the whole thing, is just to educate as much as we can. For me, it's about education. I think that music, like we said, music and film is a very, very powerful way of, and books. I pulled out 3 books, today that I wanted to show, but that can actually just turn things around eventually. I'm not seeing many viewers here. I'm just wondering whether the sound is okay. I mean, I can see Vincent's there. I'm just being straightforward, because but I'm just going to look on my phone just to see what's going on. There's 4 watching now, but I just want to. Can anybody just type a comment to say whether we're echoing or not? Because it's got messages. I'm new to the settings here. I'm just going.
It sounds fine to me, man. To me, it sounds perfectly legible and fine, and I'm happy to keep speaking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we've been going. So anyway, yeah, let's get to your next record. I mean, like I said, this is impromptu. This is how we roll it.
This next thing is, I dug this out. I hadn't listened to it in a while. It's a wonderful. Thank you, Vincent. Glad to hear the sound is good.
Thanks.
This is a wonderful record, which I have never met anybody else who has this record. I would love to hear a comment or a confirmation that anyone else even has this record. And this is a Danish.
Let's go close up on there. I'm just going. Yeah, I wanted to just know that's 1964. Keith, pull back. Yeah, so we can see the back. If you can, so you can see the whole cover. Yeah. Now, okay, so that's the Lars Lystedt Quintet live, in 1964. Turn the record around. Where was that recorded? And let's see the bottom corner. What label?
That label is Dragon. Dragon LP number 15. And I found this record literally for €1 in a cheap bin in Denmark. And I've never come across this record anywhere else, never seen a copy. And it's basically a collection of standards. There's an Ornette Coleman piece and a Benny Golson piece. It's
Coleman. I mean, for God's sake, that at least they're moving, not standards as in like, you know what I mean?
60s Danish. I mean, look at these guys, but they're playing Ornette Coleman and Benny Golson tunes. It's amazing. It's a great record. And
what's the label?
Dragon, which I don't know at all. It's not Steeplechase.
Where was it pressed? Denmark.
It's Danish.
I mean, there's some amazing. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there as well.
Where I bought this, and this is a live recording. It's a club recording. Great sound, great record, but it's just wonderful playing. It's a great example of that specific moment when there were a lot of African American musicians living in Scandinavia, and also bringing new ideas. That it wasn't just retro or reprising swing music or old bebop stuff. This is a pretty cutting edge record from the 60s, but I don't know anything about the musicians who are on it. It's really an obscure record for me.
Not on Discogs at all, hey?
No, it's an obscure record, but it's wonderful. And in keeping with that, the next one that I'm going to show is a much better known record. This is a reissue of an old live recording from that time, dealing with the African American diaspora in Europe. This is Dexter Gordon, live in France, 1978. Also, this is a pretty limited edition vinyl. I'll tell you who did the reissue. This is all tracks previously unissued, and this came out in 2019. So this is a
label
reissue. I'll give you the label in just a minute. This is a gatefold. And this, I mean,
I love Gatesville.
this is a beautiful issue. Look at this. Full liner notes. Also this.
Tip on. Yeah, possibly, or yeah, beautiful.
I'll tell you in just a second who issued this. This is a more reliable, more mainstream record than the Danish one. God, what is this? This is. It's not even mentioned here. I will have to look that up and
just look at the back corner of what says underneath it.
Elemental Records, which I don't know otherwise. But that's I can't even call it a reissue because it's a newly issued vinyl of a live recording from 1978, live in Château-Vaillant in France. And again, amazing. And Dexter Gordon is
78. They must have got master tapes. They must have had the tape somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It was recorded at the Château-Vaillant Jazz Festival, 1978, and it's George Cable's Rufus Reid. It's Dexter Gordon's New York band from the mid 70s, who also did.
Well, it's also ironic. I mean, we all saw around about midnight, and that whole thing, Gordon in that film.
Sure.
About those African American musicians in and there's an interesting thing here that I've always wanted to chat about. Maybe we'll do a later show talking about it. But was the African Americans that went into exile in France, in the 50s, at the same time as the Beats were there and all of that. And then later on, we had the South Africans, Chris McGregor and Dudu and Diani and all of them that all went more into exile in London, at least first. And there's a whole comparison about how racism hit, and then people went into exile.
Yeah, well,
it's quite interesting.
The reason for the exile was essentially the same, was to away from apartheid and from repressive structures that were constrictive on people's creativity and ability to express themselves normally and just live freely in a normal society. And in Europe in the 1950s and 60s, there was much more space for that sort of intellectual freedom. And it wasn't just in music, because many writers, both from South Africa and from the United States, like Richard Wright or James Baldwin, also lived in France, or Chester Himes. There was a large-scale emigration for political reasons. These people were political exiles of a sort who needed to live in Europe to be able to express themselves freely and to have a normal situation, also just in daily life. So
the same happened with Brazil.
Sure.
Caetano Veloso, his sister Maria Bethânia stayed, but he went to London, took acid, was tripping out of his head.
Well, of course, I think Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil were more committed on their records than Maria Bethânia or Gal Costa or these people were. Those female singers were in a more sensual vein. Their stuff wasn't so anthemic or so politically motivated, whereas the male artists from Brazil at that time were. Maybe just that regime was more threatened by.
I'm gonna throw a curveball at you. But what about somebody like Rita Lee and the Mutantes?
Well, Rita Lee also didn't go into exile, but the Mutantes basically were shut down at first, and then were able to reemerge because they backed off from the deeply political stuff. But singer-songwriters like Caetano Veloso or Gilberto Gil, they had no chance. I mean, they were arrested. They were briefly imprisoned. They had to go into exile. And that was the situation in Brazil at that time under a military dictatorship. They had no choice, no chance. Like in that situation, you really have an obvious choice where you can stay and be a martyr and be an overt political dissident like Fela Kuti did, or you go into exile and communicate to the whole world like Bob Marley did. That choice was really stark in those times for a lot of artists. And I think with artists coming from South Africa and the United States, even if you weren't politically organized on that level, just the hassles of living within that racist society on a daily level were grinding people down on such a level that there was also an existential element to moving abroad, to going into exile, that was deeper than just the overt politics. But all
just want to just a last little comment, and then we can move to the next.
sure.
And this is just a heads up to Matt Temple and Chris from Matsuli, and one of the greatest issues also, but offbeat. I think one, is most people don't know their whole story, and that was Radical Jazz, and they reissued it. Now they've just done another reissue recently, Indigo Taba and the Natives.
Sure, of course.
What that is like black consciousness music at its hardest. For me, at least, it's as radical as anything.
No, for sure. Like that's also, I mean, some of these artists were incredibly politically committed and motivated as well. And within jazz in the 1960s, that was the case everywhere. That music was becoming overtly politicized, which was driven by the events of the civil rights movement in the United States and also the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Those things were at the forefront of the thinking of a lot of jazz musicians. It was obviously a black consciousness thing, which sets up the next record nicely, which is an example of that. Not guys who moved abroad. I don't know if you have ever come across this one.
Let's go big and just get it back so I can see it. No, let's see the bottom. Live at the
Live at the East, 1973.
Juju,
which are the forerunners of the oneness of Juju, who became better known because they transformed themselves into more of a, not a disco thing, but they moved more into, I guess, something closer to Afrobeat or a more groove-oriented music. And they did a song called African Rhythms, which was rediscovered in the 1990s in the acid jazz scene in the UK and was reissued by Giles Peterson at the time. But before the oneness of Juju, which was that more dance-oriented or more groove-oriented thing, Juju, which was the original, it's the same musicians, but their original formation was really a black consciousness, free jazz, loft jazz kind of thing. This was also put out by one of the great reissue labels Now and Then, which is Egon, formerly from Stone's Throw, the hip hop label. When he branched off and started doing a lot of reissue stuff, he was responsible for all the Zamrock reissues about 20 years ago and reigniting interest in that whole scene. So that's on his label Now and Then. And which is, it's not a reissue, in fact, because it's a first issue of original tapes from that era, but amazing black consciousness, heavyweight, serious free jazz from that era with a
amazing,
wonderful sound, wonderful pressing. And there's actually it's because it's live in a club, they're soliciting donations from the audience to raise bail money for their drummer. Isn't and so the guy is also between the tracks explaining the situation of what's going on with the members of the band who are in jail. Hello to 4D Man. This also has because I also write liner notes sometimes for labels, and I communicate with Light in the Attic and Matsuli and these issues. When I see really, really good liner notes.
I love book. Let's see that poster. Come on, that's seminal.
It's amazing.
But just go McCoy Tyner Quartet. Where was that concert? I mean, what's that? East advertised.
When you call it East, which was I mean, McCoy Tyner Quartet, Lonnie Liston Smith, Sun Ra, Space Discipline Orchestra, and Betty Carter. They were playing the same week as these guys. That's incredible. Like that's that era, man. That's that era in New York, 1973. Incredible stuff. So
And
like
are you buying all of that? Are you buying all of that stuff in Europe? You're just finding it and just
again,
easy.
I bought this in one of my local haunts where I go digging. I couldn't believe that I found this record, and I found it used. So I got it, and it had been played once probably. So it was an amazing find, a steal really. But I would buy anything that I found on Now and Then Records. I think they're an incredible reissue label. Also issuing a lot of stuff on 45s, as we were talking about.
Amazing, amazing. So, is there any other records? I wanted to just go through a couple briefly. Anything else you want to go through?
Well, I would just like to access this comment by 4D Man because the last time we did this, he also appeared and asked me about writing liner notes, and he's asked again. Basically, my relationship to writing liner notes is that's not something that I do as a profession or as my main orientation to music. I'm a filmmaker. I'm also a DJ. I am heavily involved with music. I prefer to listen to music on vinyl. So I'm not a vinyl snob, but I just like listening to records. And so I like to contribute and give back to the culture as much as I can. So when I am invited or given an opportunity to write liner notes, I'm very happy to do it. And I've done it several times. And a lot of my films have spawned different reissues. Like I did the film Punk in Africa with my business partner Dion Moss in South Africa, and a couple of reissues of South African bands who had never gotten their due, like National Wake or Wild Youth, were able to do big reissue projects. So I helped out with that, and I was sort of an executive producer on the reissue projects. I was involved in the whole process, and of course, I also wrote the liner notes, which was based on a long process of research that I did on those films. Also, my Czech film Vinyl Generation, for which this stream is named in its honorific, that also because it was dealing with a lot of music that had never come out officially in the 1980s, there were some vinyl issues around that, and so of course, because it's connected with my work as a filmmaker, when these things come out, it makes sense for me also to be involved with writing the liner notes. And I also write essays based on my research and stuff that I can't use in my films because I always end up doing a lot of research, tons of interviews. And of course, the films are like 75 minutes long. So there's a lot of information that is turned up, which is really interesting, really specific on the music side that doesn't fit there, and it's wonderful to write about this and find some place to publish it. So the liner notes are connected with that. That's not like my main professional line of engagement, but it's just something I enjoy doing when it connects to the work that I'm doing anyway. And it's
a question on the screen, and I think this is quite quintessential. I've never seen it on a on any of these other streams around records and vinyl and all of that, where he says, do the liner notes come easy, Keith, or does it take several drafts? Because we all read the liner notes.
Well, it always takes several drafts. Any good writing takes multiple drafts. That's, as I was saying, there's basically my work anyway turns up huge volumes of information, which is extremely interesting, which deserves a wider audience. But I can't necessarily use all of that stuff in the film. It's the same case with my DC punk film that I'm doing now with the band Soulside. There's so much interesting stuff that comes up that's sort of weirdly peripheral that would distract from the narrative flow of a documentary film. But it's important to get the information out somehow. So there's this large volume of stuff. And then the key in terms of making it readable and making it fit to the liner note format is the editing process. So of course it's multiple drafts and it's lots of feedback and showing it to the musicians themselves and give and take with the record labels. I've been really lucky to work with record labels like Light in the Attic or with Polik Get in Czech Republic, where that's a very easy and very facilitating process, but that's also part of it. And you also work with the graphic designer and see what visual materials are available. It's a long process. To make liner notes is a whole production. It's like making a separate little film. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort, but it's a labor of love. You do that because there's people like you who are asking this question, who are out there reading this stuff, and it enhances their experience of listening to the music, which is the point of doing it. That's the whole reason to do it, is to give additional context for listening and appreciating the music.
That's amazing. You know, that's like, I kind of think, you know, how we've just kind of come up with like 2 impromptu little chats, you know, and it just, with you, that's the one thing, you know, and when I remember when we sat there, you know, that night, I mean, with the late Steve Fattar and 2 Nokwe in my kitchen, you know, and then, you know, when I was still married, had the house and you know, the kitchen turntable, you know, but just that vibe of how we gravitated over records and music and film, you know, but also with musicians at the dinner table.
The best
You
conversation.
know, a lot of people don't know, you know, I mean, 2 was involved with Bekim Seleku, you know, there's a whole jazz connection. That whole, you know, he went into exile, you know, Black Consciousness worked with Eugene Skiff, took him into exile. The stories are endless, you know, and for me, this is why, you know, I'm kind of rolling our little chats and, you know, saying to people, we'll collaborate, we'll be there. And also because it's about your films and the film that we've been working on. I mean, you know, we heard this week that, you know, Brian Wilson's wife passed. I mean, you've been backstage there. I mean, how did you feel about it?
How did I feel about meeting Brian Wilson? That was
also about his wife passing, you know.
Well, I didn't know his wife. I was happy.
Okay.
I was happy for Brian Wilson that in his later years he has found a certain peace in a certain space where he's able to revisit the amazing music that he created and produced in the past, and is able to perform that for audiences. And he gets a lot of love from that, which is what I did see backstage. I didn't know his wife. I didn't know his family situation. I actually kept my respectful distance from Brian Wilson because he's obviously a very complicated and I'm trying to say this as respectfully as possible. He's a very internal person. He's not someone that is easily approachable, and he's somebody who is able to communicate himself with great fluidity and poise and love and joy and elegance to 5,000 people who are in a room. But I don't know if he could communicate that well to 5 people in a room in a small capacity. So I recognized that, and I sort of stayed away from him, and I didn't get into his personal space too much. Obviously, I feel sad for his loss. I think he's a great boon to to the world of music. My whole childhood was shaped by Brian Wilson's music without me knowing it. That was the biggest takeaway for me when I was able to film backstage with Brian Wilson's road show in the Netherlands a few years ago for this project about the games that we were both engaged in. It was, I wasn't a big fan of the Beach Boys overtly. I wasn't someone who ever collected their records, listened to them all the time. But when I listened to him perform it, I knew the words to every single song. I knew the vocal harmonies, I knew the chords. I'd internalized all of that somehow by osmosis, which is a form of magic. And not many musicians working in the field of popular culture achieve that. I mean, the Beatles achieved that. Bob Marley achieved that. And Brian Wilson is another one of these absolute legends who sort of recreated the whole mold of popular music and pop culture from his imagination, which is incredible and enthralling. So it was exceptional just to be around him. And of course, it's sad that he suffers personal loss. I hope he will still have the stamina and the wherewithal to keep doing it, because it's amazing what he does.
Do you want to read 40 man's comments?
Yes, please.
I remember trying to get Doug Brinkley, Hunter Thompson executor, to tell me who wrote what in his liner notes, co-written with Johnny Depp for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas CD song collection. Good writing.
Well, I mean, good writing is also imperative for good liner notes. It also has to be about the quality of the writing. But I think you have to keep in mind that your writing is not the center stage aspect. That what you're writing is there to support the music and to not take it over, to not be too overwhelming. It's just to provide context for listenership and for communication with the music. Since we were talking earlier about the Fortets reissue of the Chris McGregor thing, I'll show this, which is another beautiful thing, which is this is the liner notes for that Fortets reissue of the two free jazz songs, and it's actually written by him. He did the liner notes himself, and it's mainly about how this stuff worked for him as a DJ and his relationship with these two tracks in terms of how they were part of his professional work, communicating this stuff on a dance floor to people dancing. But he's also giving you information about who played on the record and who are the musicians. So it's wonderful because it deals both with the club context and also the people buying this record who are more audiophile thing. And
well, that for me is interesting, is, and I'd love to do a stream at some stage, because where, and this is what I see happening in the vinyl community, is that there are certain like audiophile kind of people, that are, and everybody, will bicker about certain stuff, and whatever, but and then there are other people that come on streams, that are in the knowledge of certain music, and they come more out of a club culture, and they're not like total audiophiles, they don't have their records like, in every perfect sleeve, not in every perfect plastic, and they look after them as much as they can, but those records are used. I don't DJ with my records. I've done certain things digitally. I've got this great idea, I want to do a DJ set from like cassettes and 2 iPods. My records are, for me, a special thing. But
sure. That.
The DJs for me are some of the most essential people. I went to clubs, faking IDs, I started going to clubs when I was like 14, 15.
Me too. I'm also in the process of digitizing my whole collection of 45s of 7-inch singles, partly for that reason that I love playing them, and I love playing them for other people out. But I've recognized a lot of these are original Motown and Stax 45s from the 60s. They're 50, 60 years old. I have to start looking after them. So this process of digitizing them in a studio into really high quality, high fidelity FLAC recordings, but which maintain that vinyl specificity, that have the surface noise of my records and are the way that I'm used to hearing them. I'm doing that because it's also, I recognize I have to preserve these things as a medium. So I'm also into some hybrid thing. I'll just read you this thing.
We've spoken about it. I mean, you've got your man, from Radio Free Europe, who's been helping you with transcriptions, of your records, digitizing. I digitize for myself only, and then I also digitize for reissue if it's needed from South Africa. I've done a few, as you know, for Afrosynth, and also for I did the Madala Kunene, for Mr. Robert Trans. Yes. And then there's another character in the vinyl community. He's a great guy, Patrick. They call him PB Thel. He's a bit of a vinyl archivist. He's been doing needle drops for years. And it's interesting between what's the guy from Radio Free Europe, what's his name? Your mate,
Ron Sinovitz.
Yeah, so we saw how Ron was doing the stuff for you, how I do my stuff, and what styluses I use, and how I've seen what Patrick does, and now what sound cards and stuff. We all have different approaches, and that would be a very, very interesting kind of conversation amongst people that actually archive music for whatever purpose it needs to be archived for.
And we can have another stream in future, and I'll bring Ron Sinovitz on, and we'll talk about that whole process, because that we've already been working on that for 6 months, and we're barely halfway through because I have a very large collection of 45s and 7-inch records, which I love and which I love so much that I'm now thinking it's better not to take these out into grotty clubs all the time. Before we lose the thought, though, I would like to just read you this one sentence from the opening of the liner notes from the Fortet thing, which is
sure, I'm just going to go and grab a drink. And I'm
while
here.
you read this, this is from Kieran Hebden, aka Fortet, the DJ and electronic music producer, put together a reissue for Melody's Record Club of two of his favorite songs, which were put out recently on a very nice 12-inch. One is Gregor and the Brotherhood of Breath. The other is a Jackie McLean record. Both jazz tracks, really free jazz tracks from that era, from the late 60s, early 70s. But what he writes about this at the start, and his liner notes are excellent. This is just the start of it. I played both these tracks regularly at Plastic People. Peak time euphoric moments as the music usually shifted from electronic sequence productions into live studio performances that shared the tempos and rhythms, but cut through everything with their sonic power. It has always seemed cool to me when I've seen jazz records work so well in a rave. That's why I wanted to pick these two tracks to be presented this way as a 12-inch. A chance to celebrate some beautiful heavy music, also the wonderful experiences I've had DJing with it. Then he goes on to describe some background to the.
So he's sampled these before, or he's played them as is.
Played them at Plastic People and Shoom and London clubs in the past.
Fucking amazing.
But that's his opening, and then he goes on to write about Dudu Pukwana and Mongezi Feza and the actual musicians. Yeah. So there's some context there. So he's doing both. So for me, that's.
I think Mongezi played on one of Nick Drake's albums as well.
That's correct, and also,
yes.
God, who was that Trinidadian trumpeter? Who was another jazz exile in the UK? He also plays on that on the Nick Drake stuff. And Chris McGregor orchestrated the strings, I think, on one song on Brighter Later. There's a lot.
My records. 40s just asked a question. Sorry, and obviously,
just as an aside to that, Richard Thompson plays guitar on a Dudu Pukwana and the Spears record as well. So that confluence.
I am Richard Thompson for me is my favorite guitarist. But let's just answer 40's question because he's asked a question. What was the very first sentence? So he starts subjectively straight in.
Yeah, that's what he starts with straight. He's talking about his own experience as a DJ playing these records. Then he goes back into describing more the context of where these records come from, how they were recorded, what the situation was, because they're both sort of records that have a political subtext as well, as most free jazz from that time does. And when you get stuff that comes out of free jazz, which is also dance friendly and very polyrhythmic, that's really connecting to an interesting moment in world culture in the early 70s, which is directly connected with Black consciousness, Afrocentrism, Pan-Africanism, which we were talking about earlier. So he gets into that, but later. Like first, he starts off like, I played these records as a DJ, I stand by them. That's why I chose these as my 2 selections for this new reissue project. So I think they're great. Great record. I'll show it again since I think you joined us late. I'll show you the cover of that record.
I just want to jump in. I've got an interesting parallel here that actually totally relates to it.
This is the actual issue, and it's Jackie McLean on one side and Chris McGregor's Brotherhood of Breath on the other side. Both extended versions, mastered from the original tapes, and it's remastered and cut at half speed by Matt Colton, Metropolis Studios. New record. This is excellent. This is really, really a great reissue.
That's what yeah. So I'm going to show something, and this is again, I had a couple of records here, but I mean, this is just a bit of a kind of thing. And actually, this is still sealed. I had another copy. but just talking about dance music and stuff. I mean, a lot of people don't know about and I worked with this man, with this record. This one.
Oh, sure. Oh, well, I have that record as well, and that to
Talk
me,
about the dance element, but in this one,
of course. Well,
I had Moses when we opened up the radio station in Alex. I had him play there. I was there the day that they both passed. Very sad story, but just there was the whole thing. It's so just tell I'm going to read the cover. It goes genre busting South African jazz and Kwaito, which people don't even talk about. Meets Cuba, Chucho Valdez, Brazil, Flora Purim, Cameroon, Bryce Vassie, and Bristol, drum and bass. First time on vinyl, new liner notes, unseen photographs, and an exclusive track. And then obviously, I think Robert Glasper, only 10 years earlier, Sis Gwen Ansell, helped define the new cool, The Guardian, highly recommended. This man was dead in his 20s. And his wife, they had the same day. We're not going to go into that. But I mean, this is the great reissue label out of South Africa as well. Matsuli, Matt Temple, Chris Albertine, highly recommended. And Mr. Robert Truns of Vivid Speakers was, involved in this, the Mel 2000s. But yeah, what an album, and then it talks about, the spiritual jazz. And, but, this is what we're getting into is we're getting into this whole sort of where the dance floor meets the jazz, the sound, the audio, and we've got to just kind of keep it global, that we actually understand how it all actually connects. I think it's all connected in some crazy way.
Well, I mean, 2 points to that. And the first thing, which is specific to that record, Moses Taiwo Molalekwa was for me one of the biggest and most important music discoveries when I first went to South Africa, which was a little more than 20 years ago now. And that was revolutionary for me at the time, and it still is. And I think that the experiments that Moses Taiwo Molalekwa was doing, combining electronic music with the South African jazz heritage, but also with really deep South African folk music or traditional music elements, has a lot of repercussions with all the stuff which is kicking off and really happening now. I think that like someone like Thandi Mtuli is deeply indebted to his work, or even like the people that I've worked with in the past, like DJ Spoko, who knew the history of South African jazz backwards and forwards, even though he was working on electronic music productions. Those things were never really that separate for a lot of creative personalities within South African music culture. I think those things were always connected. I mean, going back decades. But in relation to that, a secondary point, there's no reason why jazz and dance floor music should be considered separate in the first place. I think that the idea that those things can and should be separated was invented by record labels or by cultural gatekeepers who were not the creators. I think jazz has always worked on a dance floor, and jazz musicians have always known this. And the world that I grew up in Washington, D.C., all jazz musicians that were my age and people that I was around as friends, they all listened to Parliament, they all listened to go-go music, they all listened to hip-hop. The stuff that Robert Glasper and Moses Taiwo Molalekwa and other figures like that came to was a result of just listening to all the stuff and absorbing it and processing it in the same way. I don't think it's
even a producer like Danger Mouse. Look at that what Danger Mouse has done.
I think Danger Mouse comes out of a tradition of people who went before him, of people who really, really deeply understood jazz from growing up with it, like Pete Rock and DJ Premier and Large Professor and other greats of New York hip hop who were sampling jazz and soul records going way back, all the way back to Marley Marl, who was like creating his own drum patterns rather than sampling a loop from James Brown or whatever. He was just sampling one snare sound, one kick sound, one tom sound, out of what were basically jazz funk records of the 70s that he knew from his parents' record collection or his older siblings' record collection. That is always part of the DNA of hip hop. I got into jazz through growing up with hip hop in the first place, but that's also for another conversation. But I
I
don't.
grew up with jazz and I got into hip hop later, but
Yeah, of course.
weird.
So since we're talking about South African stuff and Moses Taiwo Molalekwa and his lasting legacy, the next thing that I had, which I revisited this record, I hadn't heard it in a couple of months. I listened to it in October or something, but because I was listening to Juju and Chris McGregor and this stuff, and I was recognizing certain piano riffs and certain patterns, and I thought, aha, that's where the Brothers Moves On got that from.
Oh
So
yeah, that's a great. I saw them live, yeah, Cape
also
Town
on,
last year.
I also saw the Brother Moves On first in Johannesburg live, long before they were putting out records. This came out on Matsuri Records.
Talk about that band for a little bit. I mean, yeah, just
About whom?
the Brother Moves On. The style of music,
Seeing them live, or about?
just the style of music and what they,
Well, I mean, I think things like the Brother Moves On, or BCUC, or who's this other crew from Durban who do a very similar thing, where there's a spoken word element that's incorporated within the performance, and it's jazz based. It's also dance based. It's also got deep roots in traditional South African music and culture. All of these things are very committed, and they're about creating an artistic environment in a public space, and communicating a certain set of ideas to people, but not in a preachy or an ideological way, but just bringing everything together, and where it also hits on the downbeat. It's not so different from what Kamasi Washington does. And I
yeah.
had the great fortune to see Kamasi Washington and Robert Glasper and a lot of these people live as well. And that's also what they do, is they build this sense of community and communion, where it's
Kamasi
really
played at Cape Town when Rashid Lombard still had the Cape Town Jazz Festival, before it all went belly up. But Kamasi played, yeah. A couple of them, I mean, it was all buzzing. Now that festival went belly up, I mean, we know we've got to still try and get some footage
I'm sorry
for
to
the
hear.
film.
I always thought it was a huge boon, and I was also really pleased that Robert Glasper was also brought to Cape Town to play at the North Sea Jazz Festival with MF Doom. And so the
Yep.
MF Doom actually revisited his roots in Southern Africa, performing with Robert Glasper. That was right after he basically got kicked out of the United States and wasn't allowed back to see his family. He was in a really dark place, I imagine, at the time, and it clearly derailed his career. But those performances he did with Glasper on that international tour are amazing. It's some of the best stuff that you'll ever hear from Robert Glasper or from MF Doom. They were made for each other. All of that stuff, I think, is connected with what the Brother Moves On and BCUC and what some of these South African groups are trying to do.
Well,
Which,
BC, just as a heads up to any South Africans that are watching, I think BCUC are playing in Kalk Bay this coming weekend or whatever. I need to check with my mate Paul. I'd also given him a link to the stream. I'll give him a heads up. It's he's Slow Life, whatever, does gigs. But BCUC are playing a small gig out at Kalk Bay here in Cape Town, just that to let any people know. Always try and promote local music and local gigs, because we've got to keep. That's one thing about. We go on YouTube. We need to promote record companies, musicians, and also, live gigs and all of that. I think it's very important.
absolutely. I mean, promoting live gigs is the most important, because that's what musicians can actually make a livelihood and make a living from. That's their more important facets of their work and their process, much more than just putting out records. Records is something that they can sell on the side at the gig, but supporting live music, live performances, and touring musicians is really the essence of keeping all of this together. The whole culture of creative new music coming out. It's entirely connected to supporting live music. That should be stated most of all. Also, BCUC and Brother Moves On are both incredible live bands, and if anyone looking at this stream hasn't seen them, that's really something you should check out because they're magnificent and they're at the same level as Kamasi Washington or Robert Glasper or these other American artists we're talking about, but they do that in a very grounded, very rooted South African cultural way, which is exceptional. And I think they're they're sort of the harbingers of what I hope will be a whole wave of South African artists who will not only continue to do that, but continue to take that out into the world. Those are the things that I find most exceptional, most inspiring, most important within the contemporary South African music culture. I also follow all the electronic stuff out of Pretoria and Durban as well, and I like it. But I think that stuff is sort of a secondary or a parallel points to what these ensembles are doing, because those all those groups are coming out of a really traditional and really deep South African place, like Philip Tabani used to do. So it's jazz and it's very artistic and very music, but it's rooted deeply in communal experience and in communicating to an audience. Oh, nice.
It's that same weird noise that was happening. Black Music Theory.
Absolutely.
See, there's that noise coming again.
I don't hear it. Obviously, I'm a fan of all of South African music. That's something that.
Yeah, this Black Music Theory. Just to go through it, group theory. This is so this is on New Soil Mushroom Hour. It's Tumi Mogorosi's. Was this is Tumi's last project? Yes, no. It's getting confused. Yeah, Tumi. It's his last project. So on this, we've got Andile Yanana. We've got Gabby Mutuba. I'm just going through a couple. We've got Lesego Rampola King. I mean, we don't even want to talk about what a legend he is. Riza Kota. We got Sydney Mtembu. Voices Brenda Tulo, Cecilia Petu. I mean, this is like a kind of an African type opera piece recorded by Peter Orek and Oyama Songo at Downtown Music Hub, Johannesburg, end of 2021. I saw this live. It was mastered by Norman Nietzsche at Calix Mastering, produced by Andeli Yanana and Tumi Mogorosi. But this is an absolutely outstanding. It's not typical of it's quite difficult. Some people criticized it, but I'm just going to show the gatefold. Mushroom Hour also does some. This is still like gatefold. Beautiful laminated. Just let's see if we can see that. Just make it large, just so that people can see.
But that also came out in Europe, correct? That issue.
Yeah. This is not a South African. We don't press records here. Yeah, I saw this. In the live concert here. I've been in touch with Tumi over the years.
I often DJ a Tumi Mogoroso piece that's on the Indaba My People double LP issue that came out on Brownswood.
I've got that. It was done by Giles Peterson's label. Brilliant. That's a good intro for anybody that wants to get into South African jazz.
Sure. In terms of
modern,
contemporary scene, yeah, it's excellent. Actually, I don't have that in my pile of records today because I wasn't listening to it recently. But the last time that I DJ'd at a party in December, which is about 6 weeks ago, I was playing it. It's still in my record bag from the party, probably.
That's what's in Keith's bag. But listen, I think we're going to close it down soon because we've been going for now for an hour and 18 minutes.
Okay, longer than I thought.
Well, Keith, we can roll it. And I think it's a lot more chilled than last week, We didn't get to the feed that I posted up as like the link for everybody else. This is like another one. I'll still get that right. Just like, even if I'm a filmmaker and stuff, and a bit of a geek, just like getting from StreamYard into YouTube Studio was a bit weird. But, we're live on YouTube. It's just not that same stream that most people saw the link. But I think most importantly, what I'm going to start doing as well over a period of time is, I've got YouTube, that I pay for, and I'm also, Tidal and Apple, but I might just create a little bit of a playlist of some of the stuff that we discussed over the various shows, you know, that that we can that I can share with people, because I think it's a good way of sharing like what we've discussed and why the music is so relevant.
Sure, and I'll be happy to continue to work with you on that whole process. I only had
absolutely.
I only had one other record to show anyway, which was
Go for it. I mean, I could sit through the evening with you, and then it's just brilliant to always just engage with you around music. It's just it's just
but
I just
also right after I was listening to The Brother Moves On and this other stuff, what that naturally led me to was Ramsey Lewis.
Oh, yep.
Funky
Which
Serenity.
one?
Funky Serenity, which is I think 1974, maybe 1972. I would have to.
Which label was that on? Just originally?
1972 on CBS Records. This is like when Ramsey Lewis was at his peak, and but also messing with East African music and deep funk elements, but also synths and analog electronic music. There's some.
So he also went to kind of slightly into an area where Herbie Hancock went.
Yeah, it's different. It's that's actually when Ramsey Lewis passed last year, was it 2022? But I remember NPR in the United States actually had this whole debate about everyone recognizes the influence of Herbie Hancock and his continuing role through Headhunters and to Rockets and to working with DJs and early hip hop culture, but also saying like Ramsey Lewis was part of this.
Just so you know, Nick's here.
Oh, nice. Hello, Nick. So yeah, I think that Ramsey Lewis is a little bit unsung, but just as important as Herbie Hancock, and always plowing a similar furrow through that vein, like that, as we were talking about earlier, where jazz meets the dance floor and also meets experimentation and electronic music, incorporating new sounds, new rhythms, new patterns, new forms to work with, but keeping it funky, keeping it relevant for dancers.
Yeah. It's just I mean it's endless, where these streams and connects go, in terms of how different people make different connections, and that's why I'm just going to talk straight to the people that are there. Why I wanted to just jump in with yours and my relationship over a film and how we've connected over music without I wouldn't say interference, but it was more just to kind of get our group going with people, because you've taught me so much. I'm sure you've learned certain things from me. We've gravitated over years, and it's just so amazing. And it's absolutely, and 40, this comment for me is, where jazz meets the dance floor. That's it. And for me, I want everybody here, because it's going to be our thing, but it's also, and we're going to get links to it all, and it's it's on Amazon. But like my hashtag is vinyl generation, because that's why we're here. We still play CDs, we stream, we do whatever we can, but we like to listen to records. Correct.
Of course, that's how I prefer to listen to music. It doesn't mean I don't listen to streams or that I don't use Bandcamp. Those things are really important because they're also important for the artists. It's a way for them to monetize and continue what they're doing. Same with selling CDs at shows. It's important. I absolutely support all of that. But at home, when I want to relax and I want to have a drink and I want to listen to my jazz records, I prefer to listen to it on vinyl. I also prefer that it allows me to listen to music 20 minutes at a time. I just think that's a more civilized format than either looking at YouTube videos or breaking things up, listening to one song at a time, or the 75-minute format of a CD, which is great for doing an anthology of tracks over a record label or as an archival thing. That's a wonderful and magnificent format to use. But I don't necessarily want to listen to 75 minutes of rare soul singles all the time. I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to buy that, or to have that, or to work with that. When I want to listen to music, I like listening to music one side at a time.
I'm very grateful that my tube amp, some of the other units, digital units have whatever. My main tube amp with the main stylus and everything, I have no remote control. You with me? No remote control. And I've got another hashtag that I use sometimes. I call it hashtag the analog ritual. For me, that's when I drop the stylus and I put on the audio note, the main preamp, and I have no remote control. I drop that stylus and I sit back, all right, and I know that it's going to hit the end, and then I'm going to have to go up. There's no auto or anything on my turntable, and I go and I lift that stylus and I turn it over, I clean it, and I drop the stylus again. Yeah, and
I think the ritual is important because it gives you focus and it gives you a certain clarity of what you're doing. That it's like meditational. It allows you to have some space to get ready for what you're going to listen to, and the excitement of letting the needle drop and then going back, sitting down, letting it wash over you, and when it's over, you go through that again, and you get to take it off. And I think that also, if you're used to listening to vinyl and if you grew up with it as we did, hence Vinyl Generation, that enhances the experience. That only makes the experience of listening to the music better. Maybe it's different for younger people who come to vinyl after having grown up with streaming and with YouTube and with other stuff. Maybe they have a different relationship to the process. But I like the ritual to be part of the process, as do you, obviously.
Absolutely. And listen, Keith, we're going to end the stream now. You just stay in the back end of the studio. I just want to thank everybody who's been here. You know, I kind of just flipped it up to a couple of people that didn't. I want to just thank everybody. You know, we're going to just keep rolling, hopefully at least on a weekly basis. A little bit of a chat, you know, jump into other streams. Nick, I'll definitely hopefully be around for George's stream, you know, coming days. I love Nick's commentary. I'm just going to show it as a last, just to got 0 rights, but oh god, that's funny. But I just want to thank everybody. You know, Keith, this has been absolutely brilliant. Please stay just in the back end. I want to thank everyone who's watched and any people who are gonna, you know, watch this later. You know, we'll put it out. We just roll our weeks, you know, yeah, Mr. Jones, what can I say? Thank you. And I'm going to end the stream now. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for having me, Stefan.
Yeah, and just keep sticking, and I'll just, we'll just, yeah, just whatever. Thanks, everyone. Adios. Ciao.
Always.